My name is Monica Patel. I'm 40 years old, and I live in Boston with my boyfriend and my 15-year-old daughter. The story I'm about to tell happened during Christmas 2022. Nearly 3 years have passed, but that winter still lives in my chest like it never left. It began with a phone call I didn't expect. I was sitting in my office late one afternoon, staring at a half-finished report, when my phone lit up on the desk. Mom. I froze. We hadn't spoken properly in years, not after everything. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. Then I answered. Monica, she said, her voice strangely polite. How are you? We exchanged the usual empty pleasantries. Health, work, weather. It all felt rehearsed. Then she got to the point. I want the whole family together for Christmas this year, she said. Come home. Bring everyone. My fingers tightened around the phone. It had been years since we were invited to anything. Birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. We'd quietly disappeared from the family calendar. I knew exactly why. I'll talk to my family and call you back, I said finally. When the call ended, I sat there in silence, a familiar heaviness pressing down on my chest. That evening, over dinner, I told my boyfriend and my daughter. My boyfriend went quiet immediately. He knew my family history. He'd seen how carefully I'd built walls around that part of my life. My daughter, though, she lit up. Really? She asked, eyes wide. Grandma invited us? She rarely saw my parents, rarely saw her uncles, and despite everything, she still wanted to belong. I grew up in a family that valued sons above all else. I was the youngest child. My brothers were celebrated, invested in, bragged about. Then I had a daughter, and suddenly I became invisible. My brothers had sons, heirs, the future. My daughter was treated like an afterthought. Cheap toys, forced smiles, forgotten birthdays. Calls from my parents never included her. Conversations revolved around my nephew's grades, their futures, what they'd inherit. Over time, the message became clear. I had failed them by giving birth to a girl. That night, my boyfriend reached for my hand. Are you sure this is a good idea? He asked gently. I don't want her getting hurt. Before I could answer, my daughter wrapped her arms around my neck from behind. Mom, please, she said softly. I really want to go. I looked at her hopeful face and felt myself weaken. I told myself maybe things had changed. Maybe they'd grown. Maybe I was wrong. I agreed. The following weekend, we wrapped gifts together. My daughter took it seriously, choosing wrapping paper, tying ribbons carefully, making sure everything was perfect. She'd saved for months to buy her grandparents a handcrafted clock. Watching her work, I felt something close to hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd finally see her. Maybe they'd see me. I was wrong. But I wouldn't understand how wrong until Christmas night. We arrived at my parents' house a little after 5 p.m. Boston winter had already swallowed the sky. The neighborhood looked like something out of a postcard. Snow piled along the sidewalks, roofs dusted white, the air sharp enough to sting your lungs. My parents' house was drenched in multicolored lights, glittering stars taped to the windows, and a wreath so large it looked like it was trying to hide the door. My daughter squeezed my hand when we pulled into the driveway. Mom, she whispered, smiling like she was 8 again. This is going to be fun. I can feel it. My boyfriend glanced at me over the dashboard. His look didn't match her excitement. It was the same look he always gave me when my family came up. Quiet caution, like he was watching a storm roll in. Inside, the warmth hit us first. Cinnamon, baked cookies, pine, laughter, and Christmas music weaving through the air like something practiced. There were relatives everywhere, nearly 10 people clustered in the living room. My 2 brothers were near the liquor counter, talking loud enough to make sure they were the center of the room. When we stepped in, they looked up. Just a glance. Then they turned away, like we were strangers who'd wandered into the wrong house. My daughter didn't notice, not at first. A couple of older relatives came over, hugging us, complimenting her. How tall she'd gotten, how pretty, how polite. I watched her relax under their warmth, watched her shoulders loosen. And for a moment I thought, maybe I'm being unfair. Then I saw my parents. They were standing near the fireplace, laughing with someone. My mother's head turned, her eyes landed on us, and she blinked. That was all. No smile, no greeting, no, you made it. Just a brief acknowledgement before she returned to her conversation, like we were background noise. Something cold slid through me. I reached for my boyfriend's hand and tugged him subtly toward the door. We can leave now, I thought. We can pretend this never happened. But my boyfriend leaned close, voice low. Don't, he murmured. If we walk out, they'll turn it into a scene. And she's happy right now. Let her have this. I looked across the room. My daughter was laughing with a cousin, cheeks pink, eyes bright, like she belonged. And love always wins, even when pride begs you not to let it. So I swallowed it. We stayed. Dinner was a performance. The dining room was decorated with tinsel and pine branches. Everyone's plates looked like they belonged in a magazine. Conversation flowed, loud, confident, full of bragging. And every single thread of that conversation led back to my brothers and their sons. My oldest brother talked about his job like the room was his courtroom. My middle brother followed up with stories that made everyone nod and laugh at the right times. My parents soaked it up. My mother praised them like they were heroes. My father told stories about my nephews like they were already legends. My daughter sat beside me, polite and quiet, smiling when she was looked at, shrinking when she wasn't. No one asked her about school. No one asked what she liked. No one asked what she dreamed about. It wasn't just exclusion. It was erasure. The only person who bothered speaking to me was Uncle Frank, my father's cousin. Kind-eyed, steady voice. "How's work, Monica?" he asked. "Fine," I said, forcing a normal tone. "My company just opened a new branch in Chicago." He smiled like he actually cared. And that tiny bit of basic human decency made my throat tighten, because it reminded me how little I got from the people who were supposed to love me. Then my father stood up and clapped his hands. "All right," he boomed. "Time for gifts. Everyone gather around." Relief hit me so fast it almost felt like joy, because gifts meant the night was almost over. We carried our gifts in from the car. My daughter held the big bag like it was a treasure chest. She walked from person to person, handing them out carefully, eyes shining with hope. My mother accepted her gift without opening it, set it aside like it was junk mail. My father did the same. My brothers muttered thanks without looking her in the eye. I watched my daughter's smile flicker, not die, just tremble, like a candle in wind. And then my father walked to the small safe in the corner of the room. He opened it dramatically, like he was about to unveil something sacred. He pulled out 2 red envelopes tied with gold ribbon. My nephews saw them and nearly bounced on their heels. "Come here," my father said, voice proud. "Both of you." The room quieted. People leaned in. Phones appeared. And I knew, before he even opened those envelopes, exactly what was coming. He slid out 2 checks like a magician. $10,000 each, he announced, for college, for cars, for their future. Applause erupted. My brothers grinned. My mother kissed my nephews' heads like she was blessing royalty. My daughter stood beside me, hands folded politely in front of her. She stared at the checks, then at my parents. Her face brightened. She thought there would be one for her too. I felt my stomach drop. She waited a few seconds, looking around like maybe someone had forgotten her name. Then, gathering every ounce of courage a 15-year-old girl can have in a room full of adults, she stepped forward. "Grandma?" she asked softly. "Grandpa? Do I have a gift too?" Silence slammed into the room. Even the Christmas music felt too loud suddenly. My mother's eyes narrowed, like she was annoyed at being interrupted. She reached into her wallet slowly, like she was doing something she didn't want to do. She pulled out a single bill, a $10 bill, and she placed it into my daughter's hand. Quick, careless, like handing change to a stranger. My daughter froze. Her fingers curled around it, like she didn't understand what she was holding. Around us, I heard small gasps, a cough, someone shifting uncomfortably. No one spoke. My nephews stared at their checks like they were afraid to look up. My brothers smiled. It wasn't even subtle. It was the kind of smile that said, "See, we told you. You don't matter here." My daughter's eyes filled with tears so quickly it made my chest ache. And that's when something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, voice tight, hands clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. "Why does she get $10, I said slowly, "when they get 10,000? My oldest brother chuckled, like I'd told a joke. "You came to Christmas for money," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I turned to him, eyes burning. "I came for dignity," I said, "for fairness, for basic respect." He shrugged. "If you had sons," he said, smiling wider, "you'd get 10,000 too." My vision narrowed. Heat roared in my ears. I took a step toward him, pure instinct, ready to do something I'd regret. My boyfriend moved fast, grabbing my arm. "Monica," he warned under his breath. "She's watching." I looked down. My daughter was still standing there, tears spilling now, the $10 bill trembling in her hand like it weighed 100 pounds. Then my mother finally spoke. Her voice was calm, cold, certain. $10 is plenty," she said. "Boys matter, girls don't." The room went dead. My mouth opened, but no sound came out for a second. Like my body didn't believe what it just heard. "Did you really just say that?" I whispered. My mother's eyes didn't even soften. "She'll marry," she said flatly. "She'll take another name. Why would we give family assets to someone who won't carry our surname?" Uncle Frank shifted, face darkening. "This is wrong," he said sharply. "It's 2022, not 1922. My father's expression twisted with rage. "Don't interfere," he snapped. "This is family business." Uncle Frank didn't flinch. "No," he said. "This is cruelty." My father jabbed a finger toward him. "Next year," he barked, "you're not invited." The room erupted into tension. Murmurs, uneasy glances, people looking everywhere except at my daughter's face. Then my mother leaned toward me, voice low enough to feel like a blade. "It's shameful," she said, "to have a child who can't give us sons." That was it. That was the moment my heart shut like a door. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a chair. I simply walked around the room and started taking back the gifts my daughter had lovingly wrapped, one by one. From my mother's table, from my father's hands, from my brother's. Gasps followed me like footsteps. "You don't deserve these," I said, voice steady, terrifyingly calm. My daughter's face crumpled. My boyfriend reached for her hand, and we walked out, not slamming the door, not making a scene, just leaving them there with their lights and their laughter and their checks, while my daughter sobbed silently into her sleeve under the snow-filled night. And as we drove away, I realized something worse than anger. I realized I felt free. We didn't speak on the drive home. The car moved through the snow-covered streets like it was carrying something fragile, something already cracked. My daughter stared out the window, wiping her face quickly whenever she thought I might look. My boyfriend kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on her knee, grounding her the way I couldn't in that moment. When we got home, the house was quiet and warm, almost painfully normal. My boyfriend made hot chocolate without being asked. He placed the mugs on the table gently, like noise itself might shatter what little peace we had left. Then he went upstairs, giving me space without saying a word. My daughter disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on a minute later. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the fireplace as the flames danced like they always had, unaware of humiliation, unaware of bloodlines, unaware of cruelty. And my mind replayed it all. The checks, the $10 bill. My mother's voice. Boys matter. Girls don't. I didn't cry. I felt something colder settle in instead. Later that night, my daughter came downstairs quietly and sat beside me. Her eyes were red, but dry now, like she'd cried everything she had. She took my hand. "Mom," she said softly, "I'm sorry." The words hit me harder than anything my family had said. "Sorry for what?" I asked. She swallowed. "For wanting to go. If I hadn't asked, you wouldn't have had to go through that." My heart broke clean in two. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tighter than I had in years. "No," I said firmly. "Listen to me. None of this is your fault. Not a single second of it." She pressed her face into my shoulder, nodding, but I knew. Some wounds don't close just because you tell them to. When she finally went upstairs to sleep, I stayed where I was, staring at the fire until it burned low. That's when the memory surfaced. The loan. 3 years earlier, during the pandemic, my parents had called me in a panic. A storm had damaged their roof. The house needed urgent repairs, windows, wiring, everything. My brothers were both struggling financially at the time, so I stepped in. I lent my parents $20,000. Not a gift, a loan. They promised, clearly, explicitly, to pay it back within a year. They never did. They never even mentioned it again. The next morning, I made a decision. 2 days after Christmas, I sat across from Mark Wilson, a civil lawyer I knew through work connections. Pale winter sunlight streamed through his office window as I told him everything, from the Christmas party to the money. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and asked calmly, "Do you have proof this was a loan?" I slid a folder across the table. Messages, transfer receipts, a simple agreement we'd signed. Mark flipped through it, nodding slowly. "This is solid," he said. "We'll send a formal demand letter. If they ignore it, we go to court." He paused, then looked at me carefully. "I need to ask," he said. "Are you prepared for what this does to a family?" I didn't hesitate. "My family is my daughter," I said, "and the man who stands beside us." Mark nodded. That afternoon, the demand letter went out. 30 days to repay the loan plus interest. 3 days later, my phone exploded. I didn't answer a single call. Voicemails piled up instead. My father, shouting. My mother, accusing me of being ungrateful. My brothers, mocking, threatening, furious. Not once did any of them mention repaying the money. That told me everything. That evening, when I told my boyfriend what I'd done, he listened quietly, then asked one question. "Are you ready for them to show up?" I thought he was exaggerating. I was wrong. The very next day, the doorbell rang, hard, repeatedly. I looked out the window. My parents, both brothers, standing on my lawn like they owned it. My father was already shouting, "Monica, come out here!" My daughter froze at the top of the stairs. My boyfriend wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You two go upstairs, I said calmly. Lock the door. I didn't open the door. Their voices rose, angry, ugly, loud enough for neighbors to peek through curtains. Threats, insults, words meant to wound. After 15 minutes, I picked up my phone and called the police. When the officers arrived, my father tried to play the victim. The officer wasn't impressed. This is a civil matter, he said firmly. You need to leave, now. They left, furious, humiliated, powerless. A month passed. No repayment. No apology. Just silence. Mark called me one morning. The deadline's passed, he said. We file. That afternoon, I signed the lawsuit. And as I left the courthouse, something inside me felt lighter. Not because of money, but because I finally stopped begging people to see my worth. The court date came faster than I expected. 2 months passed in a blur of school mornings, quiet dinners, and nights where I lay awake listening to my daughter breathe through the wall, wondering how much of that Christmas still lived inside her. On the morning of the trial, Boston was gray and wet. A thin drizzle coated the streets like the city itself was holding its breath. I wore a black suit, simple, controlled. My boyfriend walked beside me, his presence steady, protective, without being loud. We left my daughter with a trusted neighbor. She didn't need to see this. Some battles are fought so children don't have to watch. In the courtroom, my parents sat in the front row. They didn't turn around. My brothers sat behind them, one stiff with anger, the other with a nervous energy he couldn't hide. For the first time in my life, they looked uncertain. Mark laid out the case cleanly. The loan, the messages, the agreement, the timeline. My parents' lawyer tried to call it a gift, tried to paint me as a heartless daughter, clawing money from her own parents. Then Mark calmly displayed my mother's text message on the screen. Thank you for lending us the money. We'll pay you back within a year. The judge didn't even blink. 45 minutes later, the ruling came down. The loan was real. The repayment was mandatory, with interest. Nearly $25,000 plus legal fees. My parents' faces drained of color. My oldest brother leaned in to whisper to their lawyer, who simply shook his head. There would be no appeal. As people began to stand, my father finally turned around. His face was red, his hands shook. I don't have a daughter like you, he shouted, loud enough for the room to fall silent. The bailiff stepped forward, but I didn't react. I just looked at him, calm, distant, finished. Outside, under the gray sky, my boyfriend squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, he said. I nodded. I knew. The money came weeks later. No note, no apology, just a cold transfer through lawyers. We cut contact completely. Years passed. My daughter grew into herself, confident, sharp, kind. She earned a full scholarship in computer science. Watching her walk across the stage at graduation, I felt a pride so deep it almost hurt. And I thought, this is what they never saw. Life became quiet, peaceful, until 3 days ago. It was evening. We were watching a movie together when the doorbell rang. We don't get unannounced visitors. I opened the door, and there she was. My mother, smaller, older, her arrogance stripped away by time and desperation. Your father is very sick, she said, voice shaking. Medical bills, $89,000. I didn't invite her in. She asked for help. I told her to sell the house. She asked for time. Then she asked for money. I laughed. Not kindly, not cruelly, just honestly. Go ask your sons, I said. Her shoulders collapsed. They can't help. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I turned, went inside, opened my desk drawer, and took out a single bill. $10. The same one my daughter had been given. I placed it in my mother's trembling hand. This is what I can give you, I said quietly. She stared at it, then at me. You're cruel, she whispered. I met her eyes. No, I said. I just learned from you. I closed the door, and when I turned around, my daughter was standing there, having heard everything. She looked up at me and asked softly, Can I see Grandpa? I held her face in my hands, and for the first time, I didn't know the answer. I didn't answer my daughter right away. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled credits of the movie still playing in the background. My mother's words lingered in the air like smoke, even though the door between us was now firmly shut. My daughter stood there, hands folded, eyes searching my face. Grandpa is really sick, right? She asked again, softer this time. I want to see him once. There was no accusation in her voice, no resentment, just compassion. And that scared me more than anger ever could. I guided her to the couch and sat beside her. For a moment, I simply held her hand, feeling how warm and steady it was, how real. This was the hand that had once held a $10 bill, like it was proof she didn't belong. I know you're kind, I said carefully, and I love that about you, but kindness doesn't mean you have to let people hurt you again. She looked down, blinking fast. But what if he dies? she whispered. What if I regret not going? The question landed heavy, because the truth was, I'd asked myself the same thing the moment I closed the door on my mother. I took a slow breath. Some people, I said, choosing every word, don't change just because time passes, and some wounds don't heal just because someone is sick. She nodded, even though I could tell she didn't fully understand. I pulled her into my arms, resting my chin on her head. I'm not saying this because I'm angry, I continued. I'm saying this because my job is to protect you, not just your body, your heart. She stayed quiet for a long time. Then she sighed, the sound small and tired. Okay, she said, I trust you. That trust felt heavier than any debt my parents ever owed me. Later that night, after my daughter went to bed, my boyfriend and I sat in silence. He didn't tell me I'd done the right thing. He didn't tell me I'd done the wrong thing. He just reached for my hand. And that was enough. The days that followed were quiet. No more calls, no messages, no updates. I don't know what happened after that. Whether my father recovered, whether they sold the house, whether my brothers stepped up in the end. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need to know. Because the chapter that mattered, the one where my daughter learned her worth, where I finally chose her over approval, that chapter was already written. 3 years ago, my parents gave my daughter $10 and told her she didn't matter. Today she's 18, confident, brilliant, standing on the edge of a future she built herself. And I would choose her again, every time, even if it meant closing the door forever. Now I want to ask you, was I wrong to refuse her request? Should I have let her go see him one last time? Or was protecting her the right choice? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe to follow more stories about family, choices, and the moments that define us. Thank you for listening.